Hello and welcome to this recording entitled Reporting and Wellbeing, and I hope that the next 30 minutes or so are of benefit to you and to your BE department. My name is Michael Carey. I'm the team leader for physical education, CPD and support within JCT at an exciting time for PE in curricular terms, but a challenging time for education and society in general within the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic. This video mirrors the support offered to teachers during the subject-specific cluster CPD in the academic year 2019-2020, and I hope that it's of benefit to you. As always, physical education supports can be found at www.jct.ie, and any queries or feedback is very welcome at info@jct.ie. Regular updates as well happen via the JCT Twitter handle. So this is the second of two support videos. The first being an approach to collaborative practice using learning outcomes, and the second being this particular video, reporting in physical education. So as I've mentioned, these mirror the CPD supports that were available through the cluster last year, and they're designed for teachers who might want to access information as part of, we'll say, the second subject option in the early part of the 2020-2021 academic year. So both of these are very much aligned with last year's subject-specific support. I'd also bring your attention to a webinar that was held in late March of last year, which really builds on this information, but forms an interactive piece between involving up to 450 PE teachers that took part in this particular interactive webinar. A resource was developed during that webinar, which captured samples of reporting from 10 schools, and I'll refer to that during the course of today's webinar. So that's very much available in the elective CPD support section of the JCT website. So the learning intentions today. We'll explore ways to develop an assessment culture in physical education that supports student learning. We'll consider the various means by which student learning can be supported, recorded and reported in physical education currently. And we'll recognise the deep connection between teaching, learning, assessment and reporting in physical education. So this is really looking at how reporting and how the assessment that might come just before that really enhances the type of student learning that can happen in physical education. So why explore reporting just right now? Why is this so topical? Well, the framework for junior cycle really suggested new and innovative ways of assessing student work and reporting on student learning. The central document here, the reporting guidelines, were developed by the NCCA in 2018, seeking some feedback as to how these new ways of assessment and these new ways of teaching and learning can be meaningfully reported upon. Looking within physical education, this is a time of huge opportunity for physical education. A lot of teachers are looking at digital technology as a means of supporting student learning currently. They're looking very much at planning using learning outcomes, which was viewed in our first video. And they're really looking at the assessment and reporting landscape within physical education and the implications that it has on them as PE teachers. More generally, many schools are looking at topics like formative assessment or effective feedback as current SSE focuses, school self-evaluation focuses, and that might resonate with your school as well. And more generally, in terms of looking at reporting as a wider lens within the looking at our school's document, there's a call for students to be more actively involved in reporting on their learning. And it also asks that teachers are asked to maintain records and to provide feedback to parents in a way that's clear, useful and easy to interpret. And hopefully this webinar will look at some ways that are very manageable in terms of doing that within the context of PE. So essentially over the course of today's webinar, especially the latter stages, we'll be looking at some of the key messages from the reporting guidelines which can help us. And it will also look at physical education and the junior cycle profile of achievement. So reporting at junior cycle, if we look more generally, it's felt that the approach to reporting will benefit students by charting the progress they're making, and I think very importantly, actively involving them and their parents in reflection on and discussion of their learning progress. So there's a view to make students much more active, not only in their learning, but also in how it might be reported upon. And I think a very important piece is that teacher judgment is valued and probably captured in reporting pieces of an ongoing and of a summative nature like never before. And it really gives a huge opportunity for this type of judgments and reports to link back clearly to teaching and learning within the classroom. The reporting guidelines clearly state that planning for assessment and reporting as part of planning for teaching and learning is much more likely to achieve alignment. So I think what this gets to is that planning for assessment and reporting can't be done retrospectively. It has to it's very important to give consideration to assessment and reporting as you plan from the very start. And I think that will become visible as this webinar progresses also. The reporting guidelines from the NCCA provided 8 key principles of effective reporting. And these are very, very helpful in terms of allowing us to audit what we're doing and maybe look to further steps to make our forms of reporting much more effective. And I think it's important to remember that reporting encompasses the day-to-day interactions with students, all the way to the more formal types of reports that we might provide at the end of term or at the end of the unit. Okay, so it captures both the types of reporting that happens in class on a day-to-day basis, stretching to the more formal forms of reporting. So the 8 principles include encouraging authentic engagement with parents, so providing meaningful communication and potentially promoting more interaction with parents. The second is that it provides opportunities for students through feedback to reflect on their learning. And I think that's very important because you can really see that a student is activated in the process. They are the ones that are charting their progress and identifying their strengths and areas for improvement. As I mentioned, effective reporting values the professional judgment of teachers, and the juniors, as a summative piece, the junior cycle profile of achievement values the judgment of teachers in a far more visible and meaningful way than what its predecessor, the junior certificate, would have done, where the main source of information came from the external state examinations commission as opposed to the teacher of that particular student. Effective reporting uses language of learning to provide effective feedback. So that's the language of formative assessment, and it's and also descriptors of achievement, which can be used to provide feedback and to provide support. I think probably the key one here is that effective reporting has been manageable and has been an integral part of teaching learning and not take away time from it. So I think that's an important consideration, and some of our 10 examples here would be helpful in seeing how PE teachers do that. It's very important that it clearly communicates student progress and learning, and that it provides information on a broad range of achievement, personal development, their overall learning and more general learning from participation and engagement within school, and also their academic achievement. And finally, that it's sensitive to the self-esteem and general well-being of students, and it takes an inclusive approach. So it's student-centered, and I think it can provide a lot of student voice can hugely contribute to forms of reporting, and in that way, it makes it a very personal piece for the student, and by doing so, then it is sensitive to their well-being. So I mentioned earlier the support document that was developed in the context of the recent webinar. So we worked with a sample of 10 schools to look at an aspect of their current approach to reporting within physical education. So 10 really strong examples were highlighted, and we'll look at 2 now, and we might explore them in the context of the principles of reporting that we've just looked at. So, School A. School A currently asks students to keep a personal record book to physical education booklet. And this is something that I think this school dip in and out of throughout the year. They have several student templates to support student learning within class, but also to help students to reflect after class. The booklet stays with them for 3 years, so it's a 3-year booklet, and parents are asked to view and sign aspects of the booklet over the course of this time. And they use it as a means of reporting on the learning that has happened in class. So it's the use of a PE booklet. Looking at that in the context of the principles of effective reporting, well, it certainly encourages authentic engagement with parents, because parents are asked to interact with it throughout the 3 years. And it's clear that it provides opportunities for students to reflect on their learning and potentially for feedback to be provided strongly on that, not only within class, but also if the teacher reviewed the booklets at any stage. And I think the final one, because it's a personalized booklet and a personalized portfolio per se, it can be very sensitive to the self-esteem and general well-being of students, because it is their own personal document of progress. Looking at a second school, their main form of reporting was the parent-teacher meeting. And in their school, the students attend with their parents, so it's a parent-student-teacher meeting. 5 years ago, they found that parents did not really visit the PE teacher, but as a department, they wanted to increase this engagement, but also show the rich learning that takes place within PE. So they've created a reflective loop before the parent-teacher meeting happens. So in the week before the meeting, the student answers some key questions about their learning in PE, and then during the meeting, the student reports on this. So the student is the one doing the most talking during the meeting, and the teacher then provides brief, specific feedback on the student work. So this is just an interesting way that this school have tailored their approach to the parent-teacher student meeting in this case to make it much more relevant for the student and their parents. So looking again to the principles of effective reporting, the first two are hit very strongly. It encourages authentic engagement with parents because it is their son or daughter that's reporting primarily on their experience and on their learning. And it provides students opportunities through feedback to reflect on their learning, not only prior to the meeting, but also during it. I think in terms of the last three, it clearly communicates student progress in learning and in the broad range of learning achievements that they may have within PE class. And again, it's very sensitive to the self-esteem and general well-being of the student, because they're part of the report. They have a level of ownership over it. So there are two examples from the support document that maybe capture a picture of where reporting is currently in various schools, and it might resonate again with your own. So now we'll come to looking at opportunities of our PE, and we'll make distinct reference to the reporting guidelines. And in the second part of this, we'll look at the junior cycle profile of achievement and how physical education may appear on that. So just a few messages from the reporting guidelines. I mentioned earlier that reporting is not just a formal end of term. It stems very much back into the informal interactions within class. So it's there's a very, we'll say, broad, all-encompassing idea of what reporting is, because as I mentioned, it stretches from the informal oral feedback in class, the types of reflections that the student might have in conjunction with their teachers, parent-teacher meetings, learning logs and diaries. So we've seen just examples of that in the previous slides, as well as formal end of term and end of topic reports. So as well as the more formal types. And essentially, reporting is any form of communication that provides rich feedback on student learning. So any form of communication, be it in class, be it oral, be it written, be it a phone call, anything that provides rich feedback to support student learning is considered to be reporting. And any form can be made more effective by comparing them or auditing them with regard to the 8 principles that we've just looked at. It's felt that during the 3 years of junior cycle, oral and written feedback to parents and guardians and students would be essential in supporting the student to build on strengths and address areas where learning can improve. So there's an onus on teachers to provide meaningful feedback across the 3 years, but involving students in responding to that feedback so that they can build on their strengths and areas where they could improve. So again, activating the student within assessment and within reporting is advocated here. But when it comes to the summative piece, the junior cycle profile of achievement, it doesn't do just like the junior certificate of old would have done, which is capture learning maybe in exams at the end of the 3-year cycle. It's much more encompassing. It looks to capture snapshots from throughout second year and third year predominantly. So linking classroom-based assessments and other assessments with a new system of reporting, which forms the awarding of the junior cycle profile of achievement, will offer a much clearer and broader picture of their child's learning journey over 3 years of junior cycle. So we'll look at the junior cycle profile of achievement shortly, and you'll see how it offers a much broader picture of student learning and student development across the 3 years than what might have happened before. So we're going to look to that now, but we're going to look at it particularly in the context of physical education and how PE might be reported as part of wellbeing on the junior cycle profile of achievement. So just before we come to that, I think it's important to consider the curricular options, because each of the curricular options can be reported in various ways, especially when it looks at the summative piece. So the curricular options is the NCCA developed short course for physical education. There's the opportunity for schools to design their own short course in physical education, importantly using the template and the guidelines provided by the NCCA, and of course potentially using the support and advice and feedback that is available from the NCCA also. The wellbeing guidelines and the recent circular outline also that school designed programs and modules and units of PE using Appendix I can also form the PE program. And of course, the very strong syllabus from 2003, the junior cycle syllabus for physical education, can also form a very strong platform in planning PE as part of your wellbeing journey. However, the first two pieces here allow for physical education to be reported upon through classroom-based assessment. And we'll look at the implications for that just in the coming slides. However, in the case of any of these four, regardless of which of the four options you take, consideration really needs to be given about how you'll allow students to show evidence of their learning, essentially how you'll assess students, both through ongoing and summative assessment activities, and also how you might report on student learning throughout the 3 years and at the end of the 3 years of junior cycle. So now is a good time to take stock on how we assess and how we report on student learning. This particular school here have given a lot of consideration how they assess and how they report on student learning. So even looking across their first year journey, they have a number of, as well as ongoing assessment day to day, they've got a number of assessment points, which we would have considered in PE previously to maybe culminating activities or rich tasks. So they're dotted across first year, but also the school have given careful consideration to when do we report, when do we formally interact with parents. And the Christmas report, the parent-teacher meeting and the summer report are seen as major ones where we might contact all parents. So they were really looking at how their assessment processes can feed forward into how they report, both in class and maybe on a particular document or at a meeting. And then also how this assessment and reporting can serve to enhance what type of learning took place. So in the context of aquatics there in the second module, creating a clear assessment task. This one is done in terms of a poster looking at their personal development. That can really serve as a really strong means of allowing the student to show evidence of their learning throughout their module or throughout their unit of learning, being organized and confident in aquatics. But it can also serve forward into providing evidence that could be shared and discussed in how they report to the student and to their parents at the end of that particular unit of learning. Similarly across second year and third year, and I think this school have given consideration to one or two of these assessment moments or rich tasks taking the form of the classroom-based assessments. So we'll come to that as this webinar progresses also. and overall they're considering how this might impact on how PE is reported given the new options for the junior cycle profile of achievement. So reporting in physical education as part of wellbeing. Wellbeing, as we know, was introduced in 2017. So the first years in 2017 finished their junior cycle experience in the summer of 2020. Because wellbeing is a significant amount of time, it was up to 300 hours, of course moving up to 400 hours in the coming years. Because it's a significant amount of time, there's an onus on us to report on what learning has happened in that area. So to just recap there, since 2017, PE has formed part of the wellbeing area of learning, and reporting on student learning and wellbeing is a key feature now of the new junior cycle and of the new junior cycle profile of achievement. And as I mentioned, teachers need to consider how they'll enable students to show evidence of their learning in wellbeing through both ongoing and summative assessment activities. And in terms of that summative, the junior cycle profile of achievement is now designed from 2020 to allow for learning within wellbeing to be reported upon for the very first time. Now we'll explore what that might look like. Because up to 2020, the JCPA has recorded student achievement in the state certified examinations. And maybe it's good just to take stock here. This was the only source of information that would have been provided on the junior certificate of old. Okay, so I think when we talk about the broader range of learning being shared here, we can look at the additional pieces that didn't form part of the eventual award, the junior certificate of old before. So as well as the junior cycle profile reporting on the state certified examinations, it also reports on classroom-based assessments and other areas of learning. Those other areas of learning being statements, either that are created by the school in conjunction with the student as to what their significant learning has been from engagement and participation. Of course, for some students that may, whose particular learning needs might be met through a level 2 learning program, that would appear also on their junior cycle profile of achievement. But this particular template here looks very much at the level 3 junior cycle profile. So up to 2020, the JCP has looked like this. But from 2020 forward, another section to represent the broad learning that happens at junior cycle will appear, and that is the learning within the wellbeing area of learning. So all of those existing pieces that we viewed in the last slide, as well as learning achievements in the area of wellbeing, will be reported upon on the final profile of achievement. And as we can see here, there are two sections. There's sections for classroom-based assessments that relate to wellbeing in the 3 pillars of CSPE, SPHE, and PE. And there's also an open text area, and we'll explore both of those in the coming slides. So looking at classroom-based assessments, first of all, the 2020 JCPA would have listed as a default the 3 wellbeing related short courses. So it would appear as a default on every profile of achievement for every student, the 3 titles. However, in terms of what is reported upon it, only students that had studied a short course in physical education and undertaken its associated CBA would have had the descriptor awarded on their JCPA by the school. And that would have obviously been reported as with any other CBA in the form of exceptional, above expectation, in line with expectation, or yet to meet expectation. So again, the school and the teacher would have used the criteria, the features of quality as set out in the assessment guidelines to support them within that. However, for schools that had not adopted the short course, or for students who had not studied a short course in physical education, they would have had the following descriptor entered on their JCPA by the school, and that would have been not reported. So it would have appeared as not reported, because obviously that child hadn't undertaken the classroom-based assessment as part of their learning journey. So essentially, schools that had undertaken either the NCCA developed short course or their own school design short course with its carefully crafted classroom-based assessments following the guidance from the NCCA would have been able to report on student learning via this particular area, which relates to the wellbeing related classroom-based assessments, relating of course to the particular short courses for CSPE, SPHE, and PE. Linking back strongly to the principles of effective reporting, the CBA is designed to meet a lot of those principles, because a key purpose of it is to facilitate developmental feedback to students during and at the end of the process. So the CBAs have been designed that feedback that can be provided at various stages throughout that learning and also at the end. And a key aspect of the CBA is students reflecting on their learning both during and at the end of the process as well. Okay, so the CBA process builds strongly on the principles of effective reporting. It also values teacher judgment, because the teacher would be making that particular judgment. So it's an integral part of teaching and learning. So it's designed to be manageable and not take time away from it, but only to enhance learning. And then to support student learning, the SLAR is an integral part of the CBA process. So as part of our 22 hours of professional time, we can engage with SLAR and teachers within our school or across school to support our judgment of student work. And of course, it's important to remember that all CBAs are assessed by the students' teachers and reported upon to students and parents' guardians, both at the time and on the eventual junior cycle profile of achievement. So just on that point, if we go back to our sample school here, if they had undertaken the classroom-based assessment in gymnastics in the early parts of second year, and if they had undertaken obviously the orienteering assessment in third year, they've got 2 assessments. But as well as, looking at the gymnastics one first of all, it's reported upon at that time and also on the final profile of achievement. So whatever reporting mechanism the school have of reporting to parents, in most cases Christmas report, that particular CBA will be reported upon at the time and the descriptor and associated feedback. And then of course the descriptor can also be reported at the end of the junior cycle experience as well on the junior cycle profile of achievement. So again, the profile looks to capture snapshots of learning from across second year and third year, as opposed to just summative pieces at the end of the 3-year experience. So just looking briefly about what supports PE teachers in this work, the short course specification and the guidelines for the classroom-based assessments, because those guidelines include detail of what the assessment might look like, and also the features of quality by which we could make judgments of student work. And also what would support teachers are the subject learning and assessment review meetings, where it's an opportunity to meet with colleagues and discuss samples of student work, and also annotated examples of student work relating to each of the particular assessments. So these are all things that can really support teachers in this work. Of course, the specification, the guidelines, and the annotated examples are available at www.curriculumonline.ie. In our support document, we actually had a sample of a school that has started to undertake the classroom-based assessment. So this was their report on how they were using that CBA moment to report on student learning. So they came from a tradition of having rich tasks at the end of units of learning within PE in their school. They're trying to build on these and are using classroom-based assessments to provide a record of student achievement. So student reflection forms part of the CBA experience. So the student, through the CBA, has an opportunity to report on their own personal experience. And this is how it's reported upon. The awarded descriptor and feedback forms part of our written report to parents just after the CBA, either through the student journal or the school report. We will see that in the visual of the 3-year plan. The descriptor is also reported on the student's eventual junior cycle profile of achievement at the end of third year. And they felt that the SLAR meeting was an opportunity for us as PE teachers to report to each other on the progress of our students also. So they saw the CBA as a means of reporting to students, to parents, and to themselves on student learning. So again, just looking at the principles of effective reporting, it really hits many of those principles again. Student reflection, as we can see in the second one, is an integral part of it. The professional judgment of teachers is valued throughout the process, and the type of feedback that the teacher gives to students during and after. The language of learning, especially in the forms of the descriptors, and meaningful feedback forms part of the assessment. And it's designed, as we saw, to be an integral part of teaching and learning and not to take time away from it. And it's an opportunity to clearly communicate student progress in learning. They're nice opportunities to take stock and form an assessment point by which feedback and advice can be provided to students and parents. And again, students have got a lot of choice within the classroom-based assessment, and there's a lot of flexibility as to how they might demonstrate their learning. So it is quite sensitive to the self-esteem and general well-being of students and can take an inclusive approach. So looking at the second section, we've looked at obviously reporting on well-being through classroom-based assessment in the 3 areas of CSP, SPH, and PE, but also the 2020 JCPA will have a free text box, or from 2020, the JCPA will have a free text box entitled Other Areas of Wellbeing. So if students did not study the wellbeing short courses and had obviously their wellbeing in terms of the upper section reported on as not reported, their learning achievements and learning from participation can be recorded in this free text box, Other Areas of Wellbeing. So this is a new feature, and I think the key with any new feature, we can only build on existing practice. So we'll look to that in the coming slides. Schools have the opportunity to decide how best to gather this information and how to eventually collate it on the JCPA. And there's a huge potential to actively involve students and their parents in the reflection on and the discussion of learning progress, which might lead to this particular collation and completion of the other areas of learning, other areas of wellbeing section of the junior cycle profile of achievement. Other areas of wellbeing relates to the wellbeing area of learning, but it also echoes the existing other areas of learning section of the junior cycle profile of achievement. So looking back to our overall visual of the junior cycle profile of achievement, since 2017, schools have been engaging with the other areas of learning section on the JCPA, and how schools approach this might actually give us guidance as to how we might approach the other areas of well-being within the junior cycle profile of achievement. So some schools have chosen to retrospectively gather information from students for this area. So they might have, in transition year, looked back over second year and third year and attempted to identify what their key learning, key other aspects of learning from engagement and participation across junior cycle were. However, other schools now have made it an integral part of teaching and learning for students in third year and potentially before. So they really looked at having aspects of goal setting and reflection at the time of the learning and at the site of the learning, as opposed to having a retrospective piece. And I think that probably makes more sense. So the inclusion of student developed statements within the other areas of learning previously and potentially going ahead and looking at how it could be done with other areas of wellbeing can help students become much more aware of themselves as learners. It can actively include student voice and reflection, and it really puts the student at the center of the reporting on their learning. So their voice and their words are actually evident on their final report. So they're centered to their reporting process as well as their teaching and learning. So there's the opportunity for our evolving practice and developing practice regarding other areas of wellbeing to build on existing practice since 2017 in other areas of learning. So examples of student-led statements that might have formed other areas of learning previously and might form other areas of wellbeing as we look ahead are here. In swimming class during physical education, the student reported that became more aware, organized and responsible when preparing their kit bag, and they also became more aware of the importance of water safety. If they wanted to speak about gymnastics, they really liked working as a team and considering different roles and balances as they prepared and created their sequence. And they also became more confident in performing in front of groups, in a group for their classmates. And then, of course, a student could choose to reflect on an aspect of a fitness challenge or a physical activity challenge, where they might have recorded their steps and became much more aware of their physical activity level and ways to increase it. So you can see the type of language that could be used in time for students to report on their learning from participation and engagement in PE as part of wellbeing. So looking to our support document, there were 2 schools in particular that looked at using the JCPA or reporting on learning in the JCPA under other areas of learning to date. So we'll just look at the approach from one of those. So in our school, we saw potential for PE on the newly designed junior cycle profile of achievement, particularly under other areas of learning. Along with other teachers, including SPHE and CSPE, we explored how we could support students in developing student-led statements with the support of the language of the key skills and wellbeing indicators. So they scaffolded the approach for students. They developed a number of physical education related statements that students could choose from. Students could choose one of these to be included in their other areas of learning if they so wished. And then there was scope for students to develop their own physical education statements also. So they're looking to expand that process across first year and second year in the coming year. So they saw it as a meaningful way to allow students to maybe set goals and potentially reflect on their learning. And they're looking to expand that process across first year and second year, as well as for the purposes of other areas of well-being over the coming years. So a lot of students may not be used to reflecting the learning in that way. So I think an important piece is that we have to support students in developing skills in reflecting, in setting goals, into identifying what might be the next steps for them and what their challenges are. So I think an important piece to keep in mind is that we can't just ask students to reflect on learning in third year. It's very important to build it in as part of their first year journey. And I'm thinking back to the 3-year plan we saw earlier. The assessment moments throughout first year, second year and third year really allowed students to build their ability to reflect meaningfully on their learning, to identify their strengths and challenges and their next steps. So it really is important to build it in from the start of their learning journey in first year. The NCCA developed toolkits, focus on learning toolkits, include one called Students Reflecting Their Learning, and there's lots of really meaningful and valuable tips for teachers about how they might undertake this with students and really support them in reflecting on their learning. So we've looked at the opportunities for PE, we've looked at the principles of reporting that can really allow us to audit where we are and identify maybe our next steps, and it also looks at the junior cycle profile of achievement on how PE can be reported upon as a CBA for those schools undertaking the short courses, and of course how PE could be reported in time across other areas of well-being on that final profile of achievement also. So it's an opportunity for PE. There's the opportunity to have the learning in PE reported upon and acknowledged on the final profile of achievement in a way that just was never undertaken before or never possible before. So just to go back to a few of the key messages from it. We've seen that snapshots across second year and third year are now evident. So the approach to reporting will hopefully allow students to become much more aware, and their parents are much more aware of what their learning is and what their progress is. And I think it's very clear that teacher judgment in the reporting process is much more valued, and support and assessment and reporting can really serve to support teaching and learning in the classroom. They can provide a lot of clarity for teachers and students as to what direction their learning is going and how they can take stock along that learning journey. And I think a key point that I want to go back to from earlier in this is that, you know, we can't plan for assessment and reporting retrospectively. We really have to have a very strong idea, not only across the 3 years, what assessment and reporting might look like and how it might impact on our teaching learning and support our teaching learning, but within each unit of learning, it's important to plan for, you know, what assessment moments will we have here, how will we report during and after this piece to students and parents. So it creates much more alignment on how we teach and how we report to student learning if we plan for assessment and reporting from the start and not retrospectively. Okay, we plan for this part of teaching and learning. So this piece, I hope, has given some clarity, some suggestions as to how we can further develop an assessment culture within our school in physical education. We've looked at various methods by which student learning can be supported, recorded and reported in PE, reflection being a very strong one of those. And of course, the support document will be a very good reference point for you as you consider assessment and reporting within your own school. And then, of course, we're recognising the deep connection between teaching, learning, assessment and reporting in physical education, and how it's important to consider assessment and reporting from the outset and not retrospectively, and to look at key points across the year when assessment, we'll say more formal assessment points and more formal reporting points might occur. So I hope that has been of support. Looking to the further sports, as I mentioned, this is the second of 2 videos. So this one was the second one, reporting on physical education. The first one looked very closely at an approach to collaborative planning using learning outcomes. So these support videos are both available on jct.ie. And I'm going to mention again the interactive webinar where we looked at some of this information, but in a more interactive way. And a Padlet was developed as a result of that, which had some reflections on teachers as to what their current practice is, what their next steps might be, and what sense or what meaning they took from the samples of reporting from across a number of the 10 schools. And as I mentioned there on the right hand side, you've got a number of snapshots of how schools are reporting in that particular support document. So that's it. Thank you very much for your time. I hope that it was of value for you. And if you do have any feedback regarding this webinar or any other support that we can have for you or for your school, please don't hesitate in emailing JCT at info@jct.ie. So again, thank you very much for your time, and I hope that this webinar was of benefit to you.